I saw a great pair of stats yesterday from one of the guys from PFF who said the Commanders over the last 7 games have it's negative 0.08 EPA on pass plays. So they're like negative on pass plays, but they're 6-1 in that time.
Right.
Record-wise. That should not be possible. And then Nikki Javala had a great stat that I don't remember the exact numbers off the top of my head, but basically Washington's rush yardage was about 20%, 23%, something in there for the first 6 games of the season. And since it's accounted for almost 50%, it's like high 40s, 46, 48, somewhere in there. Yeah. And I'm just like, that's it. That's it. That is the formula. They are literally doing the things they're good at and avoiding the things they're bad at, which, by the way, means because that pass offense is not stellar, it doesn't matter as much because it's just not a big part of what they do.
Right.
You know, if I'm really bad at speaking Spanish, that doesn't really affect this podcast because we do this in English. And so, not that I'm always great at English, but that's a whole different story, Logan. You shut your mouth. I want to quickly actually add our mailbag question into this segment. We've gone very long on the offense, so I want to actually add this in. You're listening to the Take Command podcast, by the way, if you didn't know. And if you like it, subscribe wherever it is that you're listening or watching right now. But AJ messaged us on Instagram, and he says, this might be a silly question, but hoping you'll indulge me and perhaps address in the pod. Well, AJ, we're here to make your dreams come true. With these running schemes we are using, how hard is it for the players to learn in comparison to more traditional offenses and running schemes? Should we be giving the coaches and players more credit for being able to retain and mostly execute on all this stuff? I'm sure they find a way to simplify, but with all the variations, motion, and timing, it seems like this is pretty impressive, especially considering it wasn't likely what was done much at all during OTAs and training camp. It just seems that everything has to be synced up so well, and the team really seems to be in unison to the naked eye. Thanks as always.
It's a good question. So what I would say is that the interesting thing about run scheme, right, is like when you install a run, it's like, oh, here is, let's just say 12 duo, because we're talking about it a lot. And you have 12 duo out of 11, you have 12 duo out of 12, you have 12 duo out of 13, right? You have it out of all these different personnel
groupings. So one back, one tight end, one back, two tight ends, one back, three tight ends, 11, 12, 13. And just so people know, the numbers in duo, that's not the same thing. So like 12 duo, evens go left.
Yeah, evens go right.
Evens go right, odds go left. So 12 is going one way, 13 is going the other.
Right. And so on this play, for example, the blocking surface, the 5-man blocking surface, really don't need to know the personnel until you get to 13 because there's probably going to be an extra safety in the box. But usually the targeting rule is like, hey, just take it to the farthest person back in the box. Safety, linebacker, doesn't matter. So for the offensive line, the motions, the shifts, it doesn't really matter. It helps if they know, right? So, for example, if we're going to start kind of in a 6-man blocking surface, which they've done a lot, and then they motion the other tight end in this counter motion and have him sift back and cut the defensive end away from the run. You want to know that because you're going to bring somebody else back into the box. So, understanding that like little wrinkle is important. But on the whole, your rule, if I lined up in 12 and had that thing, there would be a defender there, and I would go to him. Now, I need to know that there's a motion because he's going to come in late. But on the whole, like for those 5 guys, there's not a lot of variation in terms of that. The variation comes for the skill guys, right? And the cool thing about runs specifically is the skill guys, in terms of intellectual load, it's very low on runs, right? Because it's like, oh, I'm going to bring Jahan and he's going to run a jet sweep. Like Jahan just needs to hear like, oh, I'm the F, I got the jet sweep, sick, I'm going to do that, right? It's not like, oh, who am I blocking? What's the number count? Oh my gosh, it's like, jet sweep, awesome. And then if you're playing outside, it's like if the run's to me, I block the safety that's rotating down. If it's away, I'm probably going to do the same thing if it's duo, right? So again, the rules are not overly complicated. It's the window dressing and the formation that's complicated. But because the execution of it is so straightforward, right, for the 5 offensive linemen and the skill guys, we can add a little bit of stuff on there, right? I can say, hey, let's let's go west right, F left, Z jet, F sift, right? And I know because I've run duo 1,000 times in my life, and that's the other thing about duo. It's a very common run throughout the league, and everyone runs it relatively the same. I know, okay, well, if I'm the F, I know I got the Sam linebacker. And if I'm the Y, I know I got the double team the end to the Mike linebacker. And it doesn't matter all that other stuff. Like that's my rule on duo, right? And so I think that's why it's cool because they've really they've simplified the runs. So they're going to run 12 and 13 duo. They're probably going to run 13, 14 inside zone and maybe 1 or 2 outside zones. Not a ton of that, right? But that's kind of what they're doing, and they're just adding all this extra stuff on it. And people say, is that viable? Is that tenable? I mean, shoot, look at Atlanta. They ran outside zone almost every play outside of the quarterback read stuff, right?
Right.
But they are really good at it, and they have enough variations and motions and shifts off of it, and the other thing they do, which is really, really good, is they can to different runs, right? Which allows them to be in the perfect look all the time. But that is something that it's straightforward. It's simple. They're running the same things basically over and over again with different window dressing. And that to me is the sign of a really good run game. You lose something in the sauce when you add too many runs, because it's like, oh, we've got 13, 14, 15, 16, all these different runs in, and we don't own any of them. Now I feel like they have an identity that they own, and then they supplement that. They supplement the main dish. They supplement the steak with a little bit of mashed potatoes, a little bit of green beans, which is your jet sweep stuff, whatever it is. But that is the meal, is the duo stuff.
Right. The one thing I will add is the window dressing does not complicate things for the offense. It very much does for the defense, because the second like a tight end goes across the formation, now your gaps change, and they change like that right before the snap. So you have to all be on the same page to realign what gaps you're attacking. Not to mention if a team is running play action off of that, or it could be running a jet sweep, that is more to consider. So you've got a lot to think about in a very compressed amount of time for a defense. Well, for the offense, it's really not that complicated. And what more could you want, frankly? You want things that are easy for you and hard for them. Like they say in politics, you want to pick issues that are unite your base and divide the other base. That is exactly what you want to do as an offense in football. You would like to unite your team and divide the other one. And that is what a lot of this stuff does, and that's why it's complicated. Like, it's not just window dressing that defenses are like spinning in circles going like, oh my god, that's so fancy. It's like, son of a gun, which gap am I supposed to be in? They just changed the strength of the formation. They just changed their alignment. They just changed who potentially could be the person blocking me and where my eyes should be. Oh, I finally figured it out, and it was play action all along, and there goes the ball over my head. Like that is the kind of stuff that a defense has to think about, while the offense is exactly what Logan described. Very, very simple, just a matter of everybody knowing their simple part of something that adds up to being a lot more complex.
And that is a fantastic point. It's the illusion of complexity, right? If you go around the league and look at even pass games, look at all the pass games, look at all the run games, they're the same concepts. They're the same runs. It's just how that team has game planned or motioned or formationed, or even using cadence in certain ways, right, to kind of manipulate what that run is and getting to that run, because that's the little bit of edge, right? That little bit of indecision, right? So like, for example, every team runs a bow concept, which is like a sit, and then sit by number 2, number 1 runs a big in cut behind it, right? Every single team runs it. But when you watch Dallas run it, they run it with a cross release every single time, right? Or they motion across and they have the motion guy run the dig afterwards, right? Again, it's just little ways to get to the same stuff that everyone else is doing with a little bit of window dressing to make the defense go, oh shoot, this is actually a 2x2, or this is actually a 3x1, or I actually got to fit the A gap, or I actually got to fit the B gap. But if you can keep it simple for your guys, then they can play fast and execute at a high level. And I think that's a fantastic point, Greg.
All right. AJ, hopefully that answered your question. Hopefully it wasn't, by the way, it wasn't a silly question. It was a good question. So thanks for letting us answer it here on the podcast. You can also shoot us a message, leave us a comment, wherever it is that you want to get in touch with us, and maybe we'll answer your question on a future episode of Take Command. Thanks for checking out this clip of Take Command. Or maybe it wasn't a clip. Maybe it was the whole thing. You can always get the whole thing. Let's change the graphic. Ready? Boom. Producing on the fly. Bang. Wherever you get your podcasts. And, of course, right here on YouTube. You can also check us out not only at youtube.com/@CraigHoffman, but, Logan, the Odyssey Sports page is live soon. That's very exciting.
That'll be fun. I don't care where you subscribe, as long as you do subscribe to one of these platforms. That would be very helpful for us.
Yeah, do it. Or Logan's going to come to your house and he's going to be a sift blocker and knock you over.
Yeah, cut the legs out from under you, right?
You can't even do that on the field, but we can do it in real life.